Hello, hello, and welcome to Living Local After Dark, Beltway Book Club edition. I am your host, Ellen Meny, and I am so excited to welcome my guest today, Emma Baccellieri, who wrote an incredible book. Let's see if we can pull it up right now, Court Queens, with her co-author, Jordan Robinson. Emma, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, what do you do when you're not writing incredible books like this one?
I'm writing for Sports Illustrated, so very similar work, just not in book form.
And how did you get into sports reporting?
It's one of those things, as a kid, I loved writing. I really, really loved sports, just huge sports fan growing up, but I never really thought this was the kind of thing that was going to be a career just because it didn't seem like a real career.
Right.
The same way that like being an astronaut would have sounded really cool, yeah. But how many people actually get to be an astronaut and how many people get to write for Sports Illustrated? But I just got, pretty lucky in the work I did in college and right after college, and now I've been at Sports Illustrated for about 8 years.
That is so cool. Was there a specific sport that got you into the industry, or was it kind of a wide appreciation for sports?
Yeah, even though this book is basketball and most of my work right now is basketball, I grew up a huge baseball fan. I played softball. That was really important to me, and that was what my early work was. I've now been doing basketball, and specifically women's basketball, for the last couple of years, and I love it, but those early years were really all baseball for me.
So cool. I have to ask, who do you root for in Major League Baseball?
This is a bit of a cop-out, but really, once you cover it, it is hard to root as a fan.
That's fair. That's fair.
So root for good storylines and no extra innings.
Ever the journalist. I love that. And so let's dive into the book Court Queens, which is such a great title. And the book itself is absolutely gorgeous. Talk about what led to this book.
Yeah, it really is the kind of thing, as both Jordan, my co-author, and I have been reporting on the game over the last couple of years. Women's basketball is at such an exciting point right now. There's so much to see. It's getting more attention than ever, which has been amazing to see. But there's all this history, too, that it's not just the last couple of decades of the WNBA and NCAA college ball, but you have decades and decades before that. You have more than a century of history here, and of really cool women who played the sport even when it wasn't on the platform that it has today. And so the chance to kind of showcase that both in essays and in photography, which is such an important part of this, was just something that we thought was really, really special and something that we wanted to bring to life.
Absolutely. And I want to talk more about the photos and the history that you all delve into with the book. But how did you and Jordan become co-authors?
Yeah, it was a writing relationship that worked out really well. We've both been around the industry for a while, and we knew of each other even though we weren't super close, but we have, I think, pretty complementary skill sets in that she's someone who was a college player and now does more broadcasting and podcasting, and I have done the kind of more traditional magazine writing and print writing route. And so kind of bringing those two sides together and different perspectives, different connections was made for a pretty good pairing.
Absolutely. And so I want to talk about the photos and the history and all that good stuff. Here's an example of kind of just one of the pages in the book, and it is a gorgeous book. I mean, this is also the orange. This is going to look real good on my coffee table. But I mean, talk about the photography as well and kind of how that interplays with the writing.
Yeah, that was especially when you're talking about the early decades of the game, pre 1970, 1980. That was so important to us because you rarely heard about women playing basketball or really, frankly, sports in general in that time, but you even more rarely get a chance to see it. And so getting a chance to look through these photographs was just one of my favorite parts of the project. There was so much more than I think either of us realized, especially the really early days, like the photograph you guys just showed, that was from the 1890s.
Which is crazy.
Yes, it really is. And the fact that there's, not just a body of work there, research and written work to pull from newspaper coverage, et cetera, but that there was photography too. It's obviously less of it, but getting to see those women playing, getting to see what they wore, those long skirts.
I know, right? That is not, I feel like, an ideal basketball outfit.
Yeah, I mean, the way she's shooting this free throw here gives new meaning to granny style free throws.
Surely.
But yes, just getting to see that and to have that really be a centerpiece of, not just women in uniform, not just women on the court, but in action was so important to us, and I think really cool to be able to put in there.
Absolutely. And to me, when I saw that photo, especially that we just showed, I always think of basketball as a more modern sport, so to speak. More like, I think baseball, I think back to like the 20s, but basketball is really like 70s and beyond. And so to see photos like that, I mean, showcase its history. Like, how old would you say is basketball?
Early 1890s. James Naismith in Springfield, Massachusetts. And that, I think is a pretty well story on the men's side. But it really is striking. Women start playing a month or two later.
Wow.
It's right there. It's Smith College, very close to Springfield. And they have the all-women's school there that started playing basically right away.
So cool. Did you have a favorite, like, not decade, did you have a favorite like period of time to research and really dive into as you wrote this book?
Yeah, I really, really loved the 1970s and 80s is where you see it start to kind of really build, where you have the first major college ball, you have that rising to the first Final Four, et cetera. And at the same time, you're seeing the first professional league, which only lasted a few years for women, the WBL. But those women had such amazing stories to tell, both from the professional side and the college side, that, most of them are still with us. A lot of them had never gotten a chance to talk at length about how they had played and what that had been like. And just getting to talk to some of those women, to hear their stories, to kind of put in context what they were doing was so cool and really just a privilege. And then, the other side of that is like the game starts to feel more recognizable at that point. That, the rules have kind of solidified into something that's more analogous to what we see today. And then also like the 70s and 80s, you just have some really great hair, some really great uniforms.
The style and the fashion.
Yes.
Iconic.
That was one of my favorites from that early league, the WBL. There was a team in Columbus, Ohio called the Columbus Minks, and they all wore amazing mink coats. They had a sponsorship. It's so good.
Dripping in mink. I love that. So cool. Well, Emma, I'm enjoying talking to you, but we got to go to break for now. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about court queens and all that good stuff. So everybody stay tuned. We will be right back very soon. Welcome back, everybody, to Living Local After Dark Beltway Book Club edition. I'm here with Emma Baccellieri with the incredible book, Court Queens. Let me see if I can show it right now so everybody can see it. Boom. Here's my first question. Did you get to choose the orange color?
We got a voice in it, but not the final say. But yes, we both really wanted it to be orange. Okay. And then they had a couple different shades of orange, and that was a little more out of our hands. But yes, love the orange.
Like basketball orange, really. Okay, that makes sense. So you write for Sports Illustrated, and you've been, how long have you been working in the sports reporting industry?
Almost 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. How is it different writing stories for magazines about sports and books about sports?
In some ways very similar, and in others very, very different.
Okay.
I was kind of lucky here in that this wasn't one big narrative gone book length, that because it's a history divided into chapters, that you have kind of these very discrete starts and ends of each decade. It's not 250 pages of one story, one player. And so in that sense, in a way, it kind of felt like just writing 10 different magazine stories that each had a very clear beginning, middle, and end, tracing like one small arc. So that was very similar. But in terms of the scope of the whole project, that was really different. Of like, okay, we have almost 300 pages here to tell this story, that there's a lot of history here, there's a lot to cover. There are players who will have to be featured at length, and others who will get only a very small section, and some who might not get mentioned at all, and trying to decide, how do you lay that out, how do you make sure it's cohesive visually and in terms of the words and the pictures each other well. Just lots of decisions I don't have to make when I'm doing a magazine profile.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that must be a challenging part of a book like this, where you're really condensing the history of a sport into a book, decades and decades. And so I understand, like, there are moments that maybe it's like, okay, edit here, edit there. But I'll throw a question that might be tough for you, but do you have a favorite, like, fun fact you learned from the book, or any interesting, like, tidbits? I know.
There are so many, but I think one that I that really surprised me was that, you know, I knew that women had played 6-on-6 basketball before they played 5-on-5, and there were some very strict rules that kind of varied by region, but that you weren't allowed to cross in some places. You know, the court was divided into thirds. In other places, the court was divided in half, and you couldn't cross half court because the idea was that women couldn't run the length of the full court. And so I had kind of always assumed that that was something that, like, women viewed as a limitation, that girls and women wanted to play 5-on-5 and were annoyed that the rules were set up that they couldn't. And it's actually a lot more complicated than that. That especially in states that had really strong traditions of 6-on-6, like Iowa was a famous one, but you saw it kind of throughout the Midwest. You saw it even further down south. Oklahoma had a strong 6-on-6 tradition. A lot of girls and women really loved that because it meant this is our sport. Like there isn't an instant natural comparison here with boys basketball and men's basketball. This is our game. It's a little bit different, and we love it that, like, our rules are more specialized, and it creates a kind of different vibe. It's higher scoring. Defense looks a little different. The game was different, but it was theirs, and that really meant a lot to so many of those girls and women. And that surprised me. That just was a perspective I hadn't known about and was excited to learn more about.
That is fascinating, and yeah, that is really interesting. I feel like you mentioned this when we spoke earlier, but have you always wanted to write a book?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing. I think it's cliche, but probably cliche for a reason, of being a little kid and thinking, you know, when you walk into the library or you walk into a bookstore, I want to see my name on one of these spines some days. And so, yeah, that was something I'd always kind of had as a dream.
When you realized that you were going to get the opportunity to write this book with your co-author, Jordan, what went through your mind?
Excitement and gratitude, but I think also in this case, a sense of responsibility, I think, to do these stories justice, that's a lot of history. There are a lot of really cool players who have built the sport, coaches, etc. And, you know, how you put that into one book, like there was a feeling of, like, I hope we do this justice.
I think y'all did.
Oh,
it's a beautiful book. It's so interesting. Speaking of books, I want to talk about, you know, I feel like every writer reads. Do you have any books that stand out to you about sports or otherwise that you've read?
Yeah, so many. You know, in terms of sports writing, my favorite here is a really common favorite among baseball writers. It's Roger Angell, who worked at the New Yorker for a really long time and just did an incredible job of doing sports writing that felt like it was so much more than sports, just in terms of how he saw athletes as people more so than players, and how he really was able to write about what happened on the field in a way that, you know, just married in so many other themes and personalities into something that was really beautiful, that he's an all-time favorite of mine. But for this and for basketball writing, something that I turned to was a collection of basketball writing by my former SI colleague, Chris Ballard, who I think writes about the sport, I would say, better than anyone has ever done it. And so looking at his writing over the course of this was really helpful and, you know, inspiring in some senses, just to see how he was able to kind of portray gameplay in really interesting and creative ways.
That's very cool. I feel like with sports writing, it becomes elevated when it's, as you said, it's not just about the game. There's like a human element, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also just the ability to describe what's happening on the court or the field in terms that are bigger than just the action itself, that there's so much that goes into watching any live sporting event. And I think capturing what it means to be in that building, it is a lot harder than just, you know, here was a layup and here's who got, you know, the assist, and then the next play starts.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Emma, we got to run to break real fast, but when we come back, I want to talk more about this. So everybody stay tuned for the Beltway Book Club. We will be right back very soon. Welcome back, everybody, to Living Local After Dark, Beltway Book Club edition. I'm your host, Ellen Meny, here with Emma Baccellieri. She is the author of Court Queens, which we've been talking about a lot. And Emma, right off the bat, I have a question that's been on my mind this entire interview. Did you watch Space Jam?
Yes.
To research the book?
I didn't explicitly watch it for research, but I watched it enough as a child that I think it was just burned into my brain.
Yeah,
yes.
that's fair.
Lola Bunny, huge women's basketball
I was going to say an icon in women's basketball. So I wanted to thank you, first of all. That was really, I had to get that question out. We talked about the past in the world of basketball and the start, but I want to talk about the present. With players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, who are really, I feel like, redefining or bringing the WNBA to the forefront. Kind of, what are your thoughts on like where we are in women's basketball right now?
Yeah, I mean, this is a place the game has never been before. That I think there are so many numbers and stats that bear that out. But I think just from a cultural standpoint, like you said, that these players have become cultural figures in a way that really wasn't true of so many players who came before them. And so that really changes the calculus for everything about the league. And so we just saw in this last week a huge new collective bargaining agreement for the league and the players.
Yes.
That really reshapes the economic landscape of the sport. That, they signed a huge media rights deal last year, which sets up the ability to make these changes, including paying the players a lot more, a lot of things that just professionalize the experience in terms of staffing and facilities. And I think that really just kind of sets the bar a lot higher for what it means to play in the WNBA and what it means for people to be able to watch the sport and what they're going to be able to see.
And what was it like researching and seeing the trajectory of women's basketball from the early days in the 1800s to now and kind of the progress that's been made?
It was really striking that, so much you think that I've been watching this sport all my life. But yet when you sit down and put it all together, looking at, how slow this progress could be at times and then extremely fast at others, that it seems like at certain points you just kind of hit like a turbo boost and it goes really quick. And so you saw that in the early 80s when the NCAA starts sponsoring women's college sports. Then you see the late 1990s where Team USA takes it to another level. And right now, what you're seeing with where the game has gone in these last couple of years after Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Paige Beckers, all of these players, is just, going to be a really transformed experience from what it was 5 years ago.
Yeah. I was going to ask, what do you speculate about the future of the WNBA?
It's, again, kind of cliche, but really just the future is so bright right now. You're going to see a ton of player action and free agency in these next couple of weeks. You're going to see expansion starting this season, so a bigger league, I think in many ways a better league because players have more opportunities for stability, more opportunities to focus on this as a full-time job. That's just never been possible before. I think that, you already have such a great talent pipeline. You have some really bright stars and, now you're going to just see opportunities for that to get even better.
Yeah, definitely an exciting time. What do you hope people get out of this book when they read it?
Just that women have been playing basketball for a really, really long time, and there's so much history behind everything that you see today.
Absolutely. Now you've done a lot of baseball reporting, and obviously you've worked with basketball as well. Do you see yourself more has this sparked even more a passion for basketball?
The last couple of years covering the sport really, really have just been so much fun. That I had loved it for a long time, but I think just learning more, getting to see this history has only made it stronger. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I wanted to touch back on a conversation we had earlier in the episode about fashion. I know that may be trite to talk about, but I think it is important. I was looking at the book between segments and I saw Angel Reese in her gorgeous outfit. How do you think fashion kind of played a part in women's basketball throughout the years?
I think a huge part of the cultural change you've seen over the last couple of years has been fashion. I think you see these players, the tunnel fits, the outfits that they wear.
Yes.
That's become a really big thing. That's helped them find new fans and tap new audiences. Like today, as we speak, the issue of Vogue that came out today has Asia Wilson in it. That's the sort of thing that did not happen 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That there has been a real change in how these players are seen as cultural figures, fashion plates, style icons, basically.
Love that. Well, Emma, it's been awesome talking with you. I could continue to talk, but we got to wrap up our episode soon. So if people want to buy Court Queens, where do they buy it from?
Anywhere books are sold. So your local bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all of that's available.
Love that. And if people want to keep up with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I am on Instagram and Twitter under my name, Emma Baccellieri, and I'm in the pages of Sports Illustrated.
Fantastic. And, I realized we're almost done. I forgot to ask you about your soda Substack that you run. The fact that you do, what is it called? The soda pop?
The soda fountain, yes.
Oh, the soda fountain. Sorry. And so you moonlight as like a soda aficionado.
Yes, I love soda. There is one soda picture in this book, if anyone can find it. Love soda, love blogging about soda. That's, my other great passion here.
We contain multitudes. Before we go, do you have a favorite soda?
Nothing beats a classic ice cold Diet Coke.
Oh, aim. Fountain?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, that's so important to talk about that at the end of our episode about your book, but I'm going to show it one more time. You wrote this with Jordan Robinson, Court Queens. Emma, thank you so much again for joining me for the Beltway Book Club.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And everybody, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will be back next Tuesday with more all sorts of good literary stuff. So everybody keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next time. Have a great one, everybody.